So looking at my directions, first thing I want to do is I want to read my directions before I start cutting out anything and doing any kind of work with my pattern and my fabric. So instructions start after you have the layout, and here's a step-by-step to sewing success. Here's some tips. Use a straight stitch with 10 to 12 inches per stitch seam. Back stitch when starting and finishing your seams. Clip all loose threads close to their source, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch straight stitched seam unless noted otherwise. And we are going to find out that it does note otherwise on our pattern. Remember, right there we have the shaded color is the right side of the fabric.
Kara Campbell, please report to the library.
Sorry.
Kara Campbell, to the library.
The white side is the wrong side of the fabric. So your right side of the fabric will look bright, like the bright puppy or tiger paws. The wrong side is a little bit duller. So make sure that you're following that directions when you are laying out your pattern and when you are sewing. So before we start anything, you want to check the size of the hat to make sure it fits around your head. I'm pretty sure you guys are okay with this, but you might have to make it smaller or you might have to make it larger. If that is the case, you're going to follow the directions on making it smaller. So if you put that to well, I guess it's 21 inch around your head. If you need to go smaller, you're going to go 1/2 inch. But you don't want it to be too tight to put your head in the hat, and you don't want it to be too loose because then it'll fall over your head. Always, as you're going through, check off your steps so that you know where you are. I cannot help you as much as I would like to. This is a special project. It's really meant to be something that you guys read the instructions and work on it on your own. Now this video that I'm going to do is going to kind of give you some steps and some guidelines, but really it's about following directions, working quietly on your own, helping each other, because I am too busy going to be working with the basic group, getting them caught up. So if you check off where you are, you kind of know where you're at, and if I do need to help you, we can easily find it and not wasting too much time. Okay, let's see. So check the fit of the band before beginning by folding the band in half and pinning the ends together about 1/4 inch from the edge. Try the band on your head as you wear it. To make it smaller, trim a small amount and recheck the fit. Band construction. You're actually going to do the band construction, even though it's the first part in the instructions, you're going to do it after you do your actual hat, the hat part. So I'm going to start off by showing you how to lay out your pattern. Now, looking at our little packet of information, this is pretty much your pattern pieces. You don't have the back of the pattern for this one because it just doesn't have that. But on the back of the pattern, just like the presentation I did before talked about, it's going to have size of the fabric you need, any notions you need, and things like that. We are looking at the instructions. This will be inside of a normal pattern. So the instructions has the layout. So if you look at the different hats, they have a specific way to lay things out. Now, on your fabric, there's a line right here that kind of looks chewed up. That is called your selvage line. And your selvage line is really important when we are laying out fabric. Now, if you look on your little packet here, we're going to again do the hair hat. So the hair hat has where your selvage lines are. Well, you don't need that long band. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay out. Now it also has color coded. So if you see it's, let's see. You see the dark? That is the right sides of your fabric. And then the white side is the wrong sides. So your right sides for the hair hat should be facing up. And then we do a little fold with so here's the wrong side. You can tell your puppy paw prints aren't as dark. So you want your pieces facing up, actually no, facing down. we put our salvage lines in the center, you want them to be facing, pretty sides facing up. Now, I have this laid out, so the next thing I need to do is I need to get my paper scissors, and I'm going to cut out my first pattern just to lay it out. Now remember, when we're cutting out paper, we want to use not our fabric scissors, but our paper scissors. And when we cut out our pattern, we don't want to cut directly on that solid line, because you do want a little bit of extra leeway. And looking at my pattern, it tells me, so number one, it has it right here, is your band. It has the fold line. We're gonna need that when we fold our band. But for laying out, right here it has a little note that tells us place line on fold of fabric, lengthwise the grain of the fabric. So what we're gonna do, right here is our fold. And we're going to place this right here, because we are going to need this section over here. And then we're going to pin this down. Now for the other side, cut out our pattern. Now you want to make sure that when you place it, you have two sheets of fabric. This right here is kind of cut off, but this is a place line on fold of fabric. So this line, it would be a little bit above where the paper cuts off, would be your line. So you're going to place that right on the fold of the fabric, and again, pin that down. Now your next thing is you're going to have to cut out or draw your own band, just like I did here. That's going to go right there. We're going to pin that right there. So I'm going to go get some pins, and then I will show you your next part. Now looking at our instructions, your pattern has specific instructions, just like our textbook talked about. It tells you what you need to do with it, which is why it's important to keep this. And if you are doing the jester hat, which is why it's really important to write out your information on your pattern on your wax paper, because it's telling me what exactly I need to do. So when I cut this, I'm going to cut one of these, and it's going to cut on the fold. So when I open the fold up, it's going to be twice as long. And it also tells me what my seam allowance, what I need to sew my seam allowance at. So we are sewing our seam allowance at 1/4 of an inch. And it also tells me, let's see, pretty much where I should be sewing. A little sew line right there. That you won't really need, but it trying to just give you a little visual aid where you'll be sewing, because when we start actually sewing this, we'll take this off, but you'll at least get to see it. It also gives me fold lines. So even after we finish cutting this out and we sew this, we want to make sure that we have all of the information that we need from it. You don't want to throw this away. You want to keep this, because you can also make 25,000 more hats using this pattern. Now for this one right here, it has a little bit more information. It tells you to cut one on the fold. It also tells you need a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Let's see what else. Oh, and there's also the cut lines, because we're going to make the little hair for our hair hat. So we definitely want to keep that, and I'll show you how to do that when we get to that point. But you want to make sure that you pin this down correctly, so that when you cut out your lines, it doesn't move on you, so your edges are perfect. So again, keep your pattern, because you can always use this to make multiple hats. So I'm going to go get pins, and I'm going to pin my patterns down. So hopefully you kept your pin cushion, so you can use your pin cushion here. Now when I pin my fabric down, I don't want to pin it like that. I don't want to do perpendicular because when you cut, you're going to have to remove those pins. So I'm going to show you how to pin. We pin, make sure it's on the fold, straight. Parallel to the cut line. Always do parallel to the cut line. And if you learned anything from last year, the more pins you have in there, the better everything stays in place. So if I have to yell at you, you need more pins, I might have to put you back in basic group because this is something that hopefully you remember. Pin, pin, pin. Okay, so for this one right here, we're actually going to put pins in some special places, and you will find out why. And so we're going to make sure, let's see, we have the fold line here, and I'm going to put this here. Actually, where is my fold line? Oh, there's my fold line. Just like that. Okay, so here's a special time right here where we're going to put special pins in. First thing first, when you fold things, especially like this where it has a weird fold and my cuts may not be too perfectly straight, you want to make sure that you have double, I'm going to bring you closer so you can see what I'm talking about. You have both of your fabric is underneath. So right here, you see how this is a short one right here? I want to make sure that this pattern lays on 2 layers of fabric, because if you don't, you're going to have a little bit of a, it's not going to cut correctly and you'll have some extra. Now right here is we're going to add some special pins. Now we are going to be cutting on these fringed lines to make the hair, but in order for everything to stay still for us, we're going to add some pins. And we're going to add some pins in between the fringed lines, but again, you don't want to go past that cut line. That's your perpendicular cut line right here. You want to stay a little bit behind that. But this is the only time where I would like to see you do perpendicular pins to the cut line. So you're going to put a pin in every single one of these. If your pin goes beyond, a little bit past the cut line, just pull it back a little bit, and you're all good. Also, one other thing, we're going to use the edge of this paper as this cut line right here. It was a little bit too short for the copy machine, but it's still the edge of the paper, as same as this one right here. Right here we have our darts, and so we're going to learn what our darts mean in a second. But everything should lay down nice and flat. You should have your patterns down. Now for this tiny one, I want to see 2 sets of pins right beside each other like that. Don't get lazy. So I am all laid out. Now I'm going to go get my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut out my patterns. And then I'm going to show you how to work with any of the markings that we have, like the darts here, the fold line and things like that. But I'm going to go get my scissors. Alright, so now I'm going to cut out my pattern pieces. Be very careful with making sure that I get it right on the edge of my cut line. it is going to take a little bit of work to get through. Actually, I want to cut. You do want to cut pretty close to your cut line with your paper scissors, because forget what I said earlier. Do trim with your paper scissors as close to the cut line as possible. That way you're not ruining your good fabric scissors trying to cut through this paper and fabric. Look at my good shears. See how these work. Never really get to use these. Oh, these are big. These are humongous. Oh my goodness, this is just like butter. Definitely don't want to ruin those, so I'm gonna trim my cut line. Again, remember to do this before you pin it down. Just trim it close to the cut line. And remember, using edge of paper for your other cut lines. These are some huge scissors. I take it back. It does pay to spend more for some giant shears. Of course, you will not have access to these. So, using your regular scissors, your fabric scissors, it's going to take a little bit of time. Again, before I cut, I double checked to make sure my fabric was doubled over, and it wasn't, so I stopped and I made adjustments accordingly so that it would not be made a mistake. So if at any time during this project you are messing up your lines, or you're not cutting straight, or your things don't line up, it's probably because you didn't take the time to stop, double check before you started cutting. This is the only piece of material that I'm giving you. So otherwise I'll charge you $8 for one, because this fleece is extremely expensive. So please measure twice, cut once. It's an important lesson in life. This is where it's important that you had that doubled pins, because you do not want your paper to slide on you. Now this one here, the wax paper, is okay for cutting with your fabric scissors. It's really thin, it won't do too much damage. Alright, so I've got scrap. Don't throw this away, make sure I want to use it for something. I have a little bag, just put it in the bag. So here are our fabric and our pattern pieces for the fringe hair hat. If you are doing the jester hat, pretty much follow the same thing. You're going to have to cut it out. It's going to be a little bit shaped differently. We don't have to really worry about a grain of fabric because our fleece doesn't have grains. But if you were using a cotton, I will show you how to find the grain, but for today you don't need it. You kind of want to make sure that when you lay it down that you have all the puppy dog ears kind of going in one direction and not going sideways, maybe up and down. But that is up to you how you lay that out. Alright, so from here we are going to make notations, do the folds, and then we're going to follow the instructions in our packet. So that'll be the next step. For the hair hat. So if you look at the hair hat, It is on page, what says it's on page 5, right there. It's not in order, so don't count 5 pages, but it's on the one that says 5 at the bottom. We are going to start by cutting the hair. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to cut out our fabric. So we're going to do that now. So now that we have our patterns all cut out, we have our crown and we have our band cut out. I measured it, fits good, and we have our little hair tie part cut out. We're going to put these parts away right now because you don't need them. Put them in your box so you don't lose them, and you don't accidentally cut them up and do all kinds of things that might happen to them. We're going to cut out our fringes. Now the first thing it says to pin the pattern to the fabric between the dotted cutting lines, and which we've done, and we're going to check that off. We're going to cut the hair fringe using the pattern as a guide, cut along the dotted lines, cut to the fold line here, and we're going to stop at the double line. And I'm actually going to use my paper scissors just because I'm using paper and I don't want to dull my other scissors too much. It's going to take me a little bit of time, but that is okay. We're going to just follow the little dotted cut line. We're going to stop when it comes to that double line. So I'm just going to do that all the way across. You want to try to keep your line straight. You want to follow the paper. And this is why we pinned each of those down so it doesn't move on us. Alright, coming to the end right here. Whew, my fingers hurt. Now we can take off our pattern. We've gotten all of our information that we need. We don't want to throw it away because we still need some of this. And again, we can use it again for another project. But I'm going to take the pins off. And pretty much now, we're ready to start sewing. So you're going to need to find your bobbin that you threaded. If you don't have one, well, you're going to need to purchase one because I gave everyone a bobbin. So hopefully you kept up with it. So now we can cut part 2 off of our list, and we're going to do, well, part 2 of step 1. So now we're going to go into step 1, which is matching the notches. Back to the notches. Before you take your pins out, we're going to do 2 little notches here. Just like that. Now you're done with it. So now what you're going to do is you're going to turn it inside out. We're going to do our first seam. This is so cute. And we're going to match the notches up. Just like that. And we're going to pin it back. Now we can do perpendicular pins because we want to pull them out as we sew them. Now even though we are just sewing this line right here, we do want to add some extra pins just to keep things from moving on us. Just keep in mind, we're not sewing this part here, we're only sewing this little part right there. So up here, your pins will be a little bit closer together. But I added a couple here just to keep everything stabilized. Again, pin, pin, pin. If you don't have straight lines or if everything comes out crooked, because you did not pin it correctly. So from here, step 2 tells us we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch center back seam from the straight end towards the hair. So we're going to start here, and then we're going to end at a single notch back stitching. So we're going to start back stitch, so 1/4 inch, stop, back stitch right there. So we're going to hop on the machine. Alright, so I have threaded my machine. I have also threaded my bobbin, and my machine is completely, I want to make sure that I'm on 1. I want a straight stitch. I have both of my threads. I have 2 colors, so you can see the top and the bottom when I'm done. but they're through the toes of the presser foot. And now I'm going to sew. Now, if you look on the machine, there is a, very carefully on the plate, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't. Right there, there's a 1, and then there's a 2. Well, 1/4 of an inch seam is, oh my goodness, it's tiny. It is like right there. It is, see from the back maybe. So you have a 1/4 right there, and it's like the 3rd little notch, and it is halfway between the feed dogs back there. And so that is what we want for our seams. It is going to be very, very, very small. Okay, so I'm going to reset my machine and get ready to sew. Using my presser foot, I'm going to press very gently. I'm take the first needle out, remember, and I'm going to line up my stitch. I'm going to do 3 stitches, 2, and then back stitch. Uh-oh. We're going to back stitch. Okay, so then I'm going to trim all my extra threads. I have a lot of threads all over the place. So I'm going to get my scissors out. I'm going to trim all my excess threads. And then I'm going to do the next step. And as you can see, it's very, very, very small stitch. And then you can see the yellow. I use yellow so you can see it. On this side is red. You can barely see it, but it's there. Alright, so the next step on my instruction, it says to turn the hat right side out. So now you're going to have the darker paw prints on the outside. And then you're going to divide the hat opening into 4 equal parts. We're going to mark with pins. So the first one's going to be right where the seam is. Just mark that with the seam. And then it's going to be directly across that. So that is there. And then we're going to mark here. And then this corner right here. This is going to help us line up our band. Just like that. So once you get your pins in, now you're ready to do step 3, which is apply the band to the hat. So now we're going to do the hat band. Alright, so my band is right here, and there is a notch, but it's actually just a fold line. It just tells us where there's a fold. So I really don't need my pattern anymore. Just know that I need to fold it in half. So I'm going to take my pattern off, and I'm going to start with the hat band instructions. Now the hat band instructions tells us to pin the short edges of the band together to form a circle. So I'm going to do that. Get all my pins off. And we're going to do with the wrong sides, like that. Wrong sides. We're going to pin this together, perpendicular to the edge, because we're going to pull them out as we sew. Again, You want to make sure they line up, because if they're not lined up, when you try to sew that tiny 1/4 of an inch, if they're not lined up, you're going to miss one of your fabrics. So you want to make sure that they're lined up very well. Now we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam, just like we did with the other part of our hat. So I find to get started, I like to go a little bit farther than the edge and then go back over it, because it has an issue with this fleece. It doesn't like to catch it. So start maybe about 1/4 of an inch inward, and then you can back stitch a little bit over. Okay, looks good. Again, trim all your little threads. Now we're going to fold the band in half lengthwise and cut edges even and wrong side, with cut edges even and wrong sides together. All right, so that, like that. So you start off like this. This is the right or wrong sides, the dull. We're going to fold this in half, just like this, so that now our wrong sides are together. Just like that. So make sure it's even. We're going to mark it just like we did the other one, 4 parts. So we start the seam. This is 1. Directly on the opposite. This is 2. Now we need here, directly across from that one is, let's see, there. Now we're going to go and get our hat, and we're going to pin our hat to this. Okay, now this is where it's going to get tricky. So follow along, pay attention. Now we are pinning our band to our hat. Now we have our 4 pins in our hat. Remember what we did. Here's our seam. We are going to pin this to the hat. Now, this is going to go on the outside. The hat is going to go inside. So, right side's facing out. It's going to go inside. We're going to line up the seam, okay? See, here's a seam here. Here's your seam there. Your pins, you take one or you take both your pins out and repin it. The seam's lining up. Okay? Now you're going to find your second pin, which was directly across from your seam. We're going to, hopefully those two line up as well. They do. And we're going to pin that here. Okay? Now you have the seam pinned, the one directly cross pinned. Now we're going to move this pin, and we're going to, repin 3 of them together. So I'll come closer so you can see. This here is your hat material. This is the band. So they line up, and I reposition the pin right there. Now I'm going to go around. I'm going to pin more to keep everything from moving on me. Those 4 pins that we put in both of them were kind of like anchor guides to say, okay, this needs to line up with this one, this needs to line up with that one. So I'm just going around now. I'm just pinning all of my material together. I'm pinning my band to my hat. You are 99% done. So just continue to pin. Again, this is where more pins, the merrier. It will help keep everything in its place. Don't be afraid to pin. Alright, so now my next step is I'm going to stitch the band at a 1/4 inch seam, making sure to catch all 3 layers of this fabric. Stretching the band as we sew. We're going to sew a second seam towards the 1/8 edge, and then we're going to fold down. So I'm going to head over to the machine, and we're going to sew this all together. Back at the machine. We are jumping, bouncing everywhere. Alright, so this is where the foot or the little arm comes in handy. So you're going to put this underneath. Ow, don't stab yourself. There's pins everywhere. And it doesn't really matter where you start. Just make sure you got your threads, tails out. Now we have 3 layers of fleece. It is going to be a little bit difficult. And again, we're at 1/4 inch. Making sure I'm not on any needles, and I'm just going to sew all the way around. Making sure you get all 3 layers of fleece fabric. This is where pinning will help, making sure you get all those fabrics. Okay, about to come to the seam. It's going to give you a little bit of trouble because it's very bulky there. Just help ease it over. And if you sewed correctly and perfectly, you should meet up with your stitches at the other end. And I did, I'm very excited. Alright, now, your step tells you to do another seam at 1/8. That is super, super, super small. I'm not even going to allow you to try to do that. I'm just going to have you go right back over what you just did. So stay at 1/4 inch, just do another round. Try to stay as close to the same distance as last time. This is just reinforcing it. And because I used that yellow, I can see my line, so it makes it going back over a lot easier. Come into a seam. I can stop. Alright, want to turn it inside out just to make sure that I don't have any holes. Because if I do have a hole, I want to go back over and re-sew it. This is so cute. If you do it correctly, your seam should line up perfectly. Mine's just a tad bit off, but that's okay. I don't see any holes. So the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it together. Alright, so this is the easiest part. We're going to take our band that we cut, and just take off the pattern. This is the easiest part. So all we're doing is tying it around the hair. So you're going to gather up all your hair. Let's see what the instructions tell us what to do. Okay, step 3, apply the band. Apply hat band following the instructions. Make sure they match the band to the seam. So we take all of the hairs, lift it up, make sure you get all of them. Don't want any of them left out. Just like that. With the pretty sides facing out, we are going to take it just do a knot. Simple as that. There you go. You've got yourself a little hat. I'm gonna go outside now.